something like that.
Great, so I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the New Westminster Police Board to order. Our first meeting of the new year. We recognize and respect that New Westminster is on the unceded and unsurrendered land of the Halkoominga speaking peoples. We acknowledge that colonialism has made invisible their histories and connections to the land. As a city, we are learning and building relationships with the people whose lands we are on. Yeah, looking forward to continuing that conversation this year as we think about what Indigenous engagement might look like from the department. So yeah, have that in the back of my mind. Before we do the adoption of the agenda and move through though, I did want to take a moment to congratulate Paul, or Chief Constable Highland, as it were. We have some non-alcoholic bubbly beverages and some cake that we will pass around, but yeah, I'll open it up to the board members if they'd like to say anything. We did a national search, and that's not indicative of not having an excellent internal candidate. It's just, I think, a way to demonstrate that of folks that applied from across Canada, you're still the one we wanted, and the best for the job and for this community. So I think we were really impressed as a board, both with your care and commitment to this community, to the people who work in this organization. That was really evident to us. Not that we ever questioned it, but certainly in the interview process, it was really evident just how much you care about this place and the people, which is really important in this time of, recruitment and retention and trying to make sure that we've got people here. I think team culture really matters, and we're really confident in your ability to lead that. We also, there was a line you said, and I don't know, maybe I'm speaking out of turn by quoting something, but you said something about providing stability but not complacency, and certainly you shared with us some ideas and some fresh energy around the direction you'd like to take things. So we were really excited about that and think that you will do both of those things. And yeah, so congratulations. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in from the board, but.
No, I think for me, you nailed it. I had a chance to speak with Paul as well. So
awesome.
Congratulations.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you all to the board for all the time and energy put into it, and for putting your confidence in me to lead this organization. Very humbled and honored to be selected. And for anyone in the community out there that's listening, just know that I will work very hard to ensure that this community remains safe and to continue the great work this amazing organization is doing currently with the amazing membership it has. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay, well, I don't know how, I guess it's a free-for-all on the cake. Maybe I'll go pass around after. On that note, I feel like for myself, new in this role has been, I feel like I was almost acting in this role for the last few months alongside Paul, and sort of with the, now that we have a chief constable in place, and now that trickle down stability is going to come with so many folks in the acting roles, I feel like it's a bit of a fresh start for myself as well, sort of having climbed the learning curve and have a better sense of where things should go, or where I'd like things to go this year in terms of our work as a board. So really excited for that. And just want to say thank you to all of you. I know that there's been, the unknowing, we joked, the process just takes a long time. These processes do just take a long time. And I think Patrick was pointed out, Paul doesn't have to keep a straight face to just anyone. He has to keep a straight face to a room full of detectives, so just want to thank you for your patience as we, move through what will have been the largest thing this board, I think, has done together, and the maybe instability or just the unknowing that, and I know that really impacted a lot of people, both you personally, but also on your teams that you support. So we really thank everyone for hanging in there while we did it up.
Tasha,
yeah,
could I just add something?
Of course you can.
I actually just want to acknowledge yourself and Heather in the process. It was a learning curve for many of us, the process of a recruitment, and I think you both worked really hard to keep us in the loop and to do the hard work of that recruitment. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, because It was a lot more than probably you anticipated, and I just want to say thank you so much for your time and keeping us all together as a group. I really appreciated it. Yeah, I know you were there, Heather.
Happy to do it, yes. I was. So, in terms of the agenda, is there anything that folks would like to pull off consent?
Can I pull 2.7
Mhm.
and then H of 2.8, please?
Kelsey?
Pull 2.3, please.
2.8G.
2.8G.
What did you?
Patrick, Drew?
I was gonna pull G, so it's covered.
Perfect. I'm going to, I'm actually gonna move to table 2.8F, the OPCC annual report, to next meeting. It's lengthy and I think it deserves a bit more attention than we can give it, just given the rest of what we have to go through tonight. So
Sounds great, frankly, I didn't have a chance to get through the whole.
perfect. So that's okay. And I'm going to add an item on table. So I guess that'll be 4.4. And that's just touching base about the live ride along that's planned for Friday. Moving forward, I'll give the board a heads up, though I will have this conversation with you after. We are testing out this evening meeting, both to increase the public's accessibility to these meetings, but also in terms of board members respecting their day jobs. And in doing that, I really want to respect staff's time. People have lives and families. So moving forward, I'll be asking for you to tell Paul and I what you're going to pull off consent by Monday, at the end of Monday day, before the Tuesday meeting, and to let us know if you'll need staff there for those items that you want to speak to. So perhaps you just want to speak to it and share something about it, but if you have a clarification question, it'd be helpful to know on Monday so that we can let staff know whether or not they're needed. So we don't have to stay unnecessarily. Yeah,
I then would say we have to get our packages a little bit.
100%. Yeah, we're gonna. That'll be loop. We're gonna have a bigger conversation about this, but
I was
just
reading the package Monday.
I was too.
yeah, totally fair.
Actually, this afternoon, some of it.
All good. Yes, we're gonna talk about that whole process at another time together. So, okay, is that it for, so I have 2.3, 2.7, 2.8 F, G, and H. Pulled or moved. Okay, can I, will someone move the adoption of the
So moved.
agenda?
Second.
All in favor, all opposed, carried. Okay, so we're, Kelsey, 2.3, the operational report, November and December 2024.
Yeah, I just had a question in the section about the crime reduction unit. There's a reference to a proposal for provincial funding to support additional resourcing in the fleet. I just wanted to know a little bit more about that, please, and what's the length of that? What's the implications for?
Yeah, so before, back in, I think it was late spring, we had requested additional funding from the site. So that's a government funded program we put in a proposal of how much money we'd like to have and what we would use it for. They initially provided us half the funding. And then at the end, near the end of the year here, they said, oh, we have additional funding, so we'll approve the rest of that funding. It's basically for uniform patrol in the downtown. In addition to, we did another boost and bust, so property crime, working with a lot of the shops in the downtown core to prevent theft.
Okay, and is that ongoing?
It's ongoing, yeah. So they're just about wrapped up with
Oh,
that.
sorry, is the funding ongoing, or is there like a timeline to when the funding?
We got a certain amount of funding, so once that gets spent, then that funding's done.
Okay,
And then probably in April, there will be an additional funding module that comes out, and then we'd request more funding for that.
thank you.
Anything else?
That's it. That's fine.
We actually got quite a bit of funding last year through that project. I think Jacqueline could tell us, I think it was maybe, I don't know, I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, overall, yeah, it was a really positive year. A lot of good stuff happened with some of that provincial funding. Thank you.
So, okay, so, I think that was just information. I don't think we need to. I'd have to look, but I don't think we need to move anything on that. No, okay, 2.7, Mary, Ecom non-emergency dashboard.
Yeah, thank you. I know that we are going to be discussing e-com and the non-emerge operations in the future. And I believe that this is their new dashboard that they've created for us to start using. So I'm just asking if we can do a deep dive into this dashboard at the next, whenever we have that non-emerge call, because I know that we can set up this dashboard to pull data that we want to know, like that we can kind of create it in with information that we specifically want to understand better. So I'm just hoping that you can bring back a bit of a report on how we can use this to collect data that we want to have. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We were involved in the consultation with Ecom in establishing this, this new data analytics.
Yeah.
The numbers. I think this is our second month now, Jeff, right? Now we've had it, so we are also getting used to it.
Yeah.
For example, we printed all the pages basically that we can see now, but you're right, you can always tweak things
Yes.
here and there.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. So I think I don't know if we're missing anything offhand that we can think of, but I think it will take a little bit of time just to get familiar and see what gaps there are or what we really want to home in on, right? 'Cause
Okay.
There's definitely some new data in there. so.
Okay, just so that maybe the board can have a bit of a 101 on this dashboard and
Yeah, absolutely.
what
Yeah.
kind of info we can access.
Yeah.
Great, that's all I have to ask about that.
Great, thanks, Maggie. Anyone else on the econ dashboard? Yeah, I think that sounds great. Thank you for flagging that and suggesting that we do a deeper dive on that. Okay, 2.8 G, Heather, the letter from Minister Begg.
Oh, sorry, I'm losing my voice. I haven't had this voice for like a week.
Oh, no? Okay, just like
Fine.
line or,
I'm just wondering if as a board, we should reach out to Megan Harris and ask that how their consultation will be of the municipal police boards, because they're doing a review. It's very unclear what they're doing, how they're doing it,
Yeah.
who they're consulting. Is it just consulting Ecom? And I kind of wonder if we should reach out to her on some level as a board to get clarity and ask how we could inform some of that review. That's just my thought.
I can speak to that, Tasha. So, Ecom board had a call with Megan. I think it was last week. All of the board members attended a call with them so that they could give us more information about the audit. They are planning to do this fairly quickly, like potentially 3 months. And I believe the RFP has already gone out, and they did talk about they will be interviewing interviewing all of the board members. And then they will, I don't know if they will go out to all police boards, so I can certainly find that out, but she did suggest that she would be very welcome to receive information or queries from anyone, so she was very open about that kind of communication. So yes, Ecom did have a more exploratory conversation with them a week ago. Yeah, and I can get more info if that's helpful.
Heather, did you want us to reach out though proactively, or do you want to wait to hear what Mary brings back?
Well, we might want to reach out proactively if they plan to do it in 3 months.
Yeah, it's very fast.
Do you want to move that we do that?
Move.
Or I guess I can just do it, but it might be helpful if you make a motion. Okay, so move that I reach out to Megan Harris and ask how local or municipal police boards will be engaged in that consultation.
Yeah.
Perfect, okay. So second, in favor? Excellent, so I will do that. Okay. And Mary, mandate letter, the mandate letters,
I know.
they're out.
They all say the same thing.
They all say the same thing.
And I noticed that the thing about Ecom is not even in this mandate letter, so I thought that was a bit weird, but anyway, I guess what I wanted to understand is from this mandate letter, are there some things in here that we ought to be considering as a way to access more resources or support for some of the work that we do? Are there things in this mandate letter that might help us to fund potentially some of the projects or programs that we do based on what they're suggesting are their priorities? I guess I just wanted to understand what the senior management team feels about this mandate letter and how you see it sort of folding into the work that we might be doing and how we might sort of access some funding for their priorities.
The letter itself is obviously fairly high level. There's not a lot of granular detail in there. I do know that staff, and there's some more reporting out to do on it, are very engaged with the provincial government and seeking funding. And Jocelyn talked a little bit about that, whether it's the REVOI funding for repeat violent offenders or the site funding for specific projects. And yeah, so we're very engaged. I think what you do see in here is, and you've seen it on the media, is there is some concern, obviously, at the provincial and federal and even probably the municipal level about what the impacts are going to be of the new administration in the United States, and if there's tariffs and how that's going to impact funding models moving forward. So yeah, we're constantly, I think, very aggressive. The last BC Community Chiefs meetings, when they were talking about some of the PTIP funding, which is another bucket of money that's targeting violent offenders, we are punching well above our weight in the funding that we're getting, proportional to our budget and our size. So nothing specific. I don't think I can pull out of this letter because it's so high level.
Yeah.
But it's a constant look that we're having at whatever funding models we can access.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anybody else have any comments or thoughts on the mandate letter? Patrick?
The new minister should be indicating his priorities for police boards and policing at some point too, and I would guess that would get more granular, and then we can go into specifics. So I think that's forthcoming still, given it's a new minister. Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, so that's it for consent. Oh, I guess I should have moved the adoption of all the other consent items. Whoops.
So moved.
So moved.
Excellent, good. Okay, all in favor, all opposed?
And
Oh, I'm rusty. It's been a
move to accept the other ones that we just went over.
a long
Never
break,
seen it.
thank you, excellent. Okay, ongoing business, 3.1, I will pass that over to the chief.
Yeah, this is really quick. So this report is an annual report that we're required to do based on BC provincial policing standards. And it's basically, we have to go back and conduct an audit of any street checks, or also known as police stops, that we've done in the preceding year, 2024. In addition, just document the fact that since 2020, our members have all received the provincial standard training in street checks and how they are to be conducted, if they are conducted. And very quickly, as I think it's been for the last 2 or 3 years, there's been 0 street checks as defined by the standard and our policy that have occurred through 2024.
Does anyone have any questions about that? Karen?
Do you want to go first? Okay, just quickly, I wondered, so I hear that there hasn't been any street checks according to the criteria that's outlined that defines a street check. And if there were, or if there's a different kind of interaction with someone, what happens with that information? For example, if you are asked, you were on the street and ask Mr. Smith for his identification, I'm assuming that that information goes, the officer would check in Prime. Does Prime keep track of that? Is there any kind of flag that that person has been checked on the street?
There would be. So, I mean, street checks are fairly, well, the discussion around them was fairly complex. What were they? How were they done? Why were they done? Why were there disparities in certain groups being overrepresented in street checks?
Yeah.
So really they were, how it blended in with proactive policing. So really what it is police officers going out in certain situations where they see something that may be suspicious, but they don't have the authority to detain someone or arrest someone, but they're going to record that interaction formally.
Yeah.
So to your point, if they do it now, if someone did one of these now and didn't put in a street check report, there would be, if someone came in and complained and said, hey, I felt I was street checked and it wasn't done properly, we could go back through CPIC and I believe through Prime as well and do behind the scenes audits to check. Like we could basically get their name, run it and say, yeah, this is the person, this is what happened.
Okay, so I guess in that scenario, would you say that we are very cautious about street checks because of that outcome? About someone being flagged in the system when perhaps they shouldn't be?
Well, I
Like,
certainly,
is there a sensitivity around that, I guess is what I'm asking,
um,
or no?
yeah,
not
I
really?
think members realize that this standard has come out and it came out from the province and we adopted policy, they received training.
Yeah.
And they've adapted their, how it is that they conduct their proactive enforcement, and
Okay.
how they document it.
Yeah.
It's very, I mean, obviously, it's very important that when you are interacting with the public, certainly in a detention or arrest scenario, you're documenting it very
Yes.
carefully.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to, oh, there it is. The other thing that I just wanted to flag was the notion of a voluntary interaction when describing a street check. And I just question, is it really voluntary? And is that too prickly to ask you that?
Again, very complicated, and I think that language comes probably right out of the provincial policing standard.
Yeah,
So that is actually quite a legal question as well,
Okay.
because a detention can occur either overtly, like put you in handcuffs, or
Yeah.
take hold of you.
Yeah.
Or there can be a psychological detention.
Yeah.
Wherein I think it's voluntary as a police officer, but you as a citizen are like, I didn't think I had the right to leave. So
right, yeah,
to your point, it's one of those things that does come up in court oftentimes,
Okay.
even in scenarios where people are being interviewed. Did they feel that they could leave the room voluntarily?
Yeah.
So it is a factor for sure.
yeah, it stood out to me, and so that's why I wanted to ask.
It's for subjective.
Because it felt very like it's not voluntary, but you're right, it is a subjective situation. Okay,
Yeah, and that's why I think some of the guidelines are in there where they do talk about you don't have to give me your data.
Yeah.
To kind of, because I think that was the crux of some of the concerns about street checks, so to your point,
Yeah.
was I say, hey, come over here for a second, I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
You don't know if you can say no or not.
yeah,
And
that's my
most
point.
people probably won't when the police officer does that. But
Yeah.
This kind of puts more of a framework in place as to how officers have to deal with these situations.
Okay, thank you, I think more for later. It's an interesting conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a really interesting conversation. This is kind of like when I'm going the speed limit, but I still slow down another 10K anytime an interview goes by, and I don't feel like it's voluntary. Kelsey.
So I just wanted to check my understanding before I ask my question, I guess. So from reading this document, what I understand is that a street check can occur regardless of whether a police officer requests identification or not, correct?
I believe, yes, I guess in theory, yeah. If you're, I mean, it's a gray area that police officers are swimming in all the time when they're interacting with someone in this area. Are they arresting them? Are they detaining them, which is a lower standard? Are they just having a voluntary conversation with them and then break that down? Is it voluntary that the police think it's voluntary or the citizen thinks it's voluntary? So yes, in theory, I think that could occur. You could have an interaction with somebody, but generally a street check was taking their information, their personal information, documenting it, and then entering it into our police database. So that kind of was the real crux and the intent, I think, of the standards in putting a framework around when that can and can't be done and how it's done.
Okay, so the big problem was the asking for identification. And then I understand here that you would only document something as a street check if identification was requested. So there's likely other interactions that are happening that would be hard to quantify. Like you wouldn't necessarily document those if you didn't have like a person to document that you were speaking to. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of informal interactions that police officers are gonna have every
Yeah.
day. And then there is, circumstances where they will be taking information from individuals. But it's they're a witness or a victim of an offense, where they're not it's not for no reason. They're
Yeah.
asking, hey, what's your name, your date of birth, and just details so we can contact them and get information from them.
Yeah,
To be
okay.
considered a street check, it's not necessarily identification. It could just be your name.
Yeah, I was gonna
date
ask you
of
to
birth.
clarify, yeah.
So you can't just take someone's name and date of birth. It has to be voluntary.
Okay.
If you're doing like strictly a street check.
Okay.
So it's
And
not just ID, it would be also inclusive of what's your name, date of birth.
And if you asked someone's name and date of birth, then you would it would be documented in the files as,
Yes.
as a street check? Okay.
Yeah,
And you have to tell them as well that you have to give the preamble, you don't have to give me this information.
Okay.
The province was concerned about random, unfocused collection of information, from what I remember from the report, and that was the main sticking point. But there's thousands of interactions police officers are gonna have randomly, that doesn't happen, right? That random, unfocused collection of information. There's a focused collection of information, in other words, for a reason, right, versus no reason.
And then, like, not having the background, like, I went back in the board documents as far as it was easy for me to do. I suspect that we've seen a marked decrease, like, in these audits. It would be interesting, I think, at some point, just to see what the numbers actually have been, and if there's, I don't know if there's been any analysis around, like, the impact of the policy change within the department, but that would certainly be something that I would be interested to have a bit of a broader conversation about, because I mean, going to zero seems incredible, but I suspect that there was a bit of a tail to get there, and like just some analysis around how that implementation has happened in the department would be an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, I can go back and look, but I'm pretty sure that, and we're not alone here, that when the policy was enacted, most police departments, it went from X number to zero.
Right away.
It like changed the style of policing basically, right?
Right away.
Or, yeah, something that was traditionally done, was changed overnight pretty much, right?
And I think a good point of context was the challenge with street checks is the way that they were, to Patrick's point, the way that they were, I guess, described or interpreted, that it was just this random, I'm just grabbing someone off the street, saying, hey, give me your name, I'm just gonna check you out.
Yeah.
They oftentimes, in fact, the majority of times, were in situations that were suspicious, where the threshold, though, for instance, if you saw someone with a backpack and a flashlight in a back alley at night roaming around, that might be suspicious, but you can't arrest or detain that person. But you might go out and say, hey, what are you doing here? You know, and then you're going to gather their name and their information. There are other categories of files that you can also record data on, where they're more intelligence-led information, but they're not just random, but they're actually based on an objective set of circumstances that you're looking at, you know, and you have to document all that, why it is, why you were dealing with this individual. Whereas the street check was really, I think it was, you know, the perception was it was just completely random, but it wasn't. It was proactive policing and intelligence-led policing. You'd be in an area that maybe was a high drug trafficking area, and members would be down there and be trying to identify individuals at random, but people that they thought for a variety of factors may be engaged in the drug trafficking trade, but not enough evidence, again, to arrest or detain them, but they want to identify them for intelligence purposes. So that's really tailed off.
Interesting. Anybody else? So there's a recommendation here that we receive the report for information. So moved. One second. Wait, Kelsey, I'll put down there, I think that it would be interesting to have a conversation about the analysis of the impacts. Yeah. So that's fine. Okay, new business. 4.1, Canadian Framework for Trauma-Informed Response in Policing.
Yeah, this probably could have gone into consent. This was a document or a framework document that we received from the CACP, that's the Canadian Chiefs. It is a framework for trauma-informed response in policing. Andrew Perry's done a deeper dive on it. It really is kind of categorizing much of the work that we're already doing, certainly in BC, but even in this police department. I believe, Andrew, you said that this document was done in collaboration between Quebec, Ontario, and the RCMP.
That's correct, yeah.
Much of this work has already been done in some of our provincial policing standards. But Andrew, I'll turn it over to you. You've done a deeper dive on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I reviewed the document, and also just for some history, for example, there are provincial policing standards relating to trauma-informed practices. And basically they started to roll out, from the last that I have, most recent record I have, back in 2019, for example. That's when I first did my first trauma-informed practice training. So we've had that for quite a while. There is now a formal standard as of 2024 where everyone has to meet these standards. So for example, is that all frontline police officers, supervisors have to have taken a trauma-informed practice training that is accredited and approved by the province. So we need to meet that. At the time when we rolled it out years ago, We went beyond that and had all officers doing that, because I can tell you in 2019, I was on frontline policing, so. As well too, there's another standard, those that are working with vulnerable sector individuals, such as domestic violence investigations or sexual assault investigations, they have to do and update their trauma-informed practice training every 3 years. So it's a little bit more recent. So I think we have had both a foundation here in the province and at this department for quite a while. What I found helpful about the document, I found the document reviewed or went over a lot of things that are already happening within our department based on what we are doing and also the provincial standards. What I did find helpful about this document and the framework was the review section. And the review section basically provides a trauma-informed police response scorecard. So different areas of the organization in which to look for and to monitor and evaluate how well we are doing. So I'm still working through those to see, get a better take on if there's any gaps that maybe we can work on. But for example, if it's in training or policies and procedures or reports or interviewing practices or also member wellness, this relates not just victims, but also offenders, witnesses, and also the police officers. So it's a broad approach when we look at that. But for example, we all recently had to complete an Indigenous awareness course that was accredited by the province. And you see the trauma-informed practices are embedded within, most of everything that we are doing these days, especially from a training standpoint. So I was pleased to see that. I believe we're in good shape when I reviewed this document. So, and also too, we don't know what provincial standards Quebec or Ontario have in regards to what they're doing. So, thank you.
Mary on the queue.
Thank you. I just want to ask, so is this training covered off in the JI when someone is first receiving their training, or is it something that we need to do as a department later on when someone is actually?
I have to double check this. We've had a lot, but we have confirmed that some is being done and is embedded within the JI already. So when they come out, because I can't remember which one we did recently. So I'd have to double check that, Mary, to be certain.
It'd be good to know.
But it is, we definitely know a lot of stuff that we had to actively do before. We don't have to because it's now part of the JI. But I can't remember. We just did an audit on a few of them. I can't remember which ones. I don't want to speak out of turn.
It's okay. It's okay. Maybe when you finish the review,
Absolutely, yeah.
you could also let us know what's happening at the JI and then what we're doing is sort of a follow-on and
Yeah,
how
absolutely,
often
yeah.
people are receiving that kind of.
But we are, for example, because it's an annual and we've been monitoring the Indigenous awareness course completion, we are aware and have been doing that audit of any gaps in regards to that in multiple areas. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else on this? So are you intending to fill out the scorecard? Like, is that the intention that we would
Not at this point in
use
time,
this
no,
as a
no.
framework?
Just simply, I'm looking at to review to see what do we need to do with this,
Yeah.
or should we take a more structured approach to our trauma-informed practices? So
Maybe, maybe after you do that review, it would be helpful to, if there are large gaps, if we can, take a look at this. I was curious about this. I'd like to know where, I would like to know where we score on this. But also understand that, it's another thing on your plate. So perhaps if there are some gaps that we can easily identify, but I think it covers a lot of things, including partnerships in the community, which has been, conversation at this table, but also member wellness and training. So I would like to know sort of how we're doing as a whole, not just with members receiving training. That while that's really important, I think there are also quite a few other things here that
I can tell you, please feel free, anyone else, but for example, interviewing practices, right? How you approach interviews with a variety of different, whether it's an offender or a victim, those approaches are all embedded within that as well too.
Yeah.
So as you said, it's not just member focused. So
Yeah, so for the trauma-informed practice foundations curriculum, we're in compliance for all frontline police police and supervisors, and since January 2021, it's in the JI curriculum.
Okay, great.
So everybody hired since then.
When they're hired, they have it.
Correct.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, just move to receive. Second.
Second.
Favor. It's carried. Okay, the BCAPB, the BC Association of Police Board 2025 conference that is being held in Delta, show-stopping Delta.
At a casino.
At a casino, no less. Right in the thick of where it's all going down. Yeah, so there's been a sponsorship request. I will pass that over to Chief Highland.
Yep, there's a sponsorship request from BCAPB, and just by way of history, last year the board did agree or approve the $575 coffee break sponsorship. So we're in the board's hands as to what it would like to do.
And just to reiterate, same thing I said last year, CAPG has a decent budget, BCAPB does not. So any help that can be provided towards the conference is greatly appreciated by BCAPB, given that there's not much room in the budget for any of this stuff. So.
I'm certainly not opposed to a sponsorship level, but if we have a running list of things we want to cover off in governance, it would be great to have a policy around these kinds of asks, so we don't have to have these sort of one-off questions as to whether we will or won't support something and what's the criteria for supporting and how much and all of that. So I would love that to be added to our ever-growing.
Nobody wants to see my list of policy gaps that we have.
But if we get through it, we'll be in such a better place.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not opposed, whatever.
Sure, I mean, I guess I will also just nod down to Jacqueline down there.
Do we have the money?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would move a coffee break.
Sure.
Second.
All
I
in
second your
favor?
coffee break.
All in favor? All opposed? Carried. Awesome. We will provide coffee for the folks down in Delta. And on that note, I guess if board members are interested in attending that conference, Daisy sent out the information. It's my understanding, got good clarification that we don't sponsor accommodation or pay for accommodation when it's within Metro Vancouver. So while you're all, I don't think anyone was chomping
Damn
at
it,
the
I'm
bit
missing out on staying in Delta?
I know, at the casino, but you have to come home that night or it's on you. Perfect. Okay, so 4.3, promoting unbiased policing.
Yes, the unbiased policing provincial policing standard requires us as a police department to engage in a number of different audits and reviews. One of which is this one, and I just wanted to bring this to the board because last year we did the first one of these, and we did a analysis of our SBORs, which is subject behavior officer. Sorry, we did it on prisoner booking records. We basically, according to this standard, we broke it down or disaggregated it by gender and race, and that report was given to the board. But it does reference in here that the board does have some discretion and other records that it might want reviewed for that disaggregated data. My recommendation would be for this year, and I'm open again to whatever the board would like to do, is that the board seek this disaggregated data on the SBORs, the subject behavior officer response reports, just given there's been a bunch of work done in that area already, and we will be able to be data that we provided in more timely manner to the board.
Did you put your hand up?
Can you tell me what subject behavior
No, I'm
officer
just saying, I
response
didn't want to
means?
go ahead
No,
and
no,
you go
sure.
first.
So a subject
That's
behavior.
why I was
Oh,
gonna ask
sorry.
my same question.
A subject behavior officer report is a report that a police officer has to fill out anytime they use a level of force. And the lowest level, basically, I mean, anything really above consensual handcuffing is going to result in this, whether it's, soft physical control, which is, joint locks or putting the arm behind someone's back, right up to, lethal force. So anytime that's done, a police officer has to fill out one of these reports. It gets attached into Prime, which is our police record management system. And then I'm not sure if it's monthly or annually or what, we disclose that data to the province. It's anonymized, so they're not aware of the member's name. So that's what an SBR is. It's basically a use of force report that they have to complete.
That was my only question, thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Mary?
I have another question, but I wanna follow up on that. So I'm not really clear. So the data that we're collecting is what happened or what happened to whom? Or who did what? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure, what is the data that we're actually collecting?
In the SBOR,
Yes,
it's almost like a templated document where it starts out with everything from the weather, the situation. It's a massively detailed document, and including an area for narrative. And what it's documenting is, why is it that the member involved used the force that they did? And it can be something as innocuous as they drew their firearm and pointed at somebody.
Yeah.
But it's basically, they have to justify why it is they did what they did.
do we collect data on who the person was that the behavior was impacting?
It's not in the SBOR, but you could get that data, and I could talk a little bit more of that.
So
Later.
really, are we only collecting, we had 20 officers point their weapon at someone, we had 30 officers handcuff someone. So it's not ever about the person, it's about what the officer did. Is that
Yes,
what you're
it
saying?
might have physical descriptor, it might have gender information, because that can be relevant in the
Yeah.
situation of why an officer decided to use a level of force.
Yeah.
It would not have a name or that data attached,
Yeah,
but it is attached to the file. So
okay,
we would be able to go into that SBOR and go back and look at the file itself and know who the force was used against.
what would the SBOR tell us? Like, why do we care?
Mary, further you said, is it just about what the officer did?
Yeah.
It's what the officer did to respond to the subject's actions, right?
Okay,
All of our behaviors or responses typically are in response to
okay,
the subject's action. So, for example, if we attend, I'll give you an example, one of the awards that happened, that we talked about on the awards night, we're responding to a male with two hatchets in the back lot, threatening to harm himself and the police officers.
Yeah.
He's now running with the hatchets towards them. The
Yeah.
officers are drawing various levels of use of force, right,
Yeah.
to respond to that. But they will describe the subject's behavior and why they responded in the way that they did. And
Okay.
that has to be reasonable,
so
proportionate,
that's the data.
justified, right?
Okay,
And,
that-
and,
okay.
so as Paul says, it is a large document. What's the size of this individual? What's the distance? What's the proximity? What's the lighting? How many were there? What weapons did you have? Which ones didn't? What were you trained?
Okay,
It's an extensive document, and
so
this
it's
is
more about this action equals this response.
correct.
And how many times you responded in this way for this type of action.
Correct. So as
Okay.
Paul's saying, at the end of the year, for example, one of the things could be CEWs, right? So
I don't know what that
conducted
is.
energy weapons, or sometimes
Taser,
called a
yeah.
taser, right, is the brand. For example, at the end of the year, all those results, like how many times did we draw and display? How many times did we discharge
Sure.
something? What were the reasons? Was it because, was there any indication someone was suffering from a mental health incident, right? All of that is factored into, compiled in these annual stats
Okay.
that police services have.
And do we use that data in any way? Like, as a department,
Yes.
how do we review it and what for?
So probably, it's actually a really good conversation to have. We've been working on a report, like kind of a 5-year analysis report on our use of force, just so we can look at it and track it. Like what are the trends? What aren't the trends?
Yeah.
What we can't, at least that I'm aware of, pull out of the SBORs is we can pull out what the member did.
Yeah.
It's a little more difficult to pull out what they were responding to.
What
So
prompted that?
yeah, that would take probably a little bit of a deeper dive to go into all the circumstances. But what the data would show is, okay, US members used the police baton X number of times in 2024. To go in and say, well, what were the specific circumstances? That would be a little more in detail. But what we can do, I think in talking with Jeff, who's pulled that data in this area for other reasons, disaggregating the use of force by gender and race, we could do. That would not be difficult. So we could say it might just be an overall number, like we used, depending on how granular we want to get, there were X amount of use of force incidents by the New Westminster Police Department in this year, and this was the gender breakdown, this was the racial breakdown.
Okay. And so I guess you want to use this data as a way of understanding if perhaps there's any abuse of use of force, if, or like, would you compare it against the type of calls that you're getting? Like if you were getting a whole bunch of, I don't know, making it up, a car being broken into, yet you had a wild amount of guns being pulled calls, would you try to understand if there's sort of a disconnect between the type of calls we're getting and the type of response you're using?
No, because I don't think those. like,
You're not matching
We don't
it
have the
that way.
capacity to have
Okay.
that level of analysis. And
Okay,
we can do the use of force and track, like how many times were guns pulled.
Yeah.
And it's basically based on provincial reporting that they're asking. And even that changes over time.
right,
What
okay,
they're asking for in 2019 is different than what they're asking for now.
okay,
To your point about use of force, we would look at that more in complaints. If we're getting certain amount of complaints in a certain area, that's when we start looking at, okay, why are we seeing more complaints about X force option being used?
Yeah.
We don't see a lot of that.
Yeah.
Certainly not substantiated ones. We do get complaints about use of force, but we see a very low level, if any, to my recollection, of substantiated use of force complaints under the Police Act.
okay. Thank you. I'm sure we could go on for hours.
I
Interesting.
think this use of
To
force report,
understand
yeah,
it
it
more.
would break down kind of the statutory and the framework that police officers use when they're gonna deploy a force option, right from the very low one. I mean, the first force option is just your presence. We show up, does that gain some level of compliance with the individuals we're dealing with? And then it goes right up again to lethal force. It's complex, and of course, the members have to make these rapid decisions and, with minimal information, but there is a framework there that it might benefit the board to see what it is, how it is that it affects their decision-making and what the actual data is telling us.
Can I ask another question? The other standard was promoting diversity within the police force. Is that something that we didn't collect? I think we chose to do or that was an option that the ministry offered?
Just give me 1 second.
No. Did I read it wrong?
There's a series of
Okay.
standards. So the broad brush is promoting, there's 3 different standards.
Yeah,
This one is specific to this analysis.
okay, okay.
Again, given some of the newness on the board, we could perhaps bring back the provincial, the equitable policing standards.
Okay.
They're significant, they're lengthy.
Yeah.
But it might benefit the board to have a look at those, especially I think we brought them in about 3 years ago, so there's probably some people that aren't aware of all the different
Mhm.
standards.
Yeah, that would be good.
Good.
And I have one last question, I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry, but I don't want to take up too much time. The last one was that in this report, we refer to a variety of other reports and inquiries, missing women and the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. In my time on the board, we've kind of loosely talked about some of those reports, but I don't know that we ever as a board or department have really looked into the requests and the recommendations from those reports and how we would implement or attempt to achieve some of those recommendations. And I'm wondering if that's anywhere on our work plan to actually discuss in the future.
I know from our perspective, given just staff capacity, we kind of rely on the province when these big recommendations come down. Generally, that's where we're getting a lot of these provincial policing standards. But again, if the board,
I think that's maybe, not I think maybe, that's a great thing to bring to the. when we start
Strategic
talking
planning.
about the strategic plan
Okay.
for, yeah.
Yeah,
Next
I didn't think we
iteration of
had,
it.
but because we kind of loosely talked about it, but I just wanted to know if it was something that had been done before.
I mean, we do put them forward, when these reports come out, we always look at them. Oftentimes the specific outputs or outcomes are very, very high level. And how it is that they work their way down to like us. We rely heavily on police services to kind of provide us guidance in that
Okay.
area.
Okay, we can consider that for strategic planning. Thank you, that's all I have.
Patrick and Chelsea.
Yeah, just a quick example. I mean, the province passed standards on missing persons, right? Passes it down to police services. That's wickedly changed how police services go about missing persons now. And that comes from these inquiries and these reports. So it does flow down. I get what you're saying, Mary, about maybe considering it again on a more granular level at the board for the department, but it's not like policing is not acknowledging this as a whole,
No.
and it is flowing down.
Yeah, no,
for sure.
yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Patrick. I'm not making that assumption,
Yeah.
but just curious. Thank you.
I was just wondering, would it be a significant additional amount of staff work to add through to 2024 to the SBOR reports?
Sorry,
You
with
said,
regards to this report or?
yeah, well, you said that you could bring, you're recommending that we could request a report on SBOR reports from 2018 through to 2023.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, would it be like a huge amount of work to add 2024? No, could we please add 2024? Would be
You
my,
know, we've done a bunch of work on this, and
Yeah.
we'll talk about later, but,
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, my take on your point there, Mary, is not that it's not trickling down and being incorporated into updated standards. But just as a board, have we been intentional in that conversation and sort of stating that as a priority?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. So that's a great conversation. So there's a recommendation here that the New Westminster Police Board request a report on NWPD subject behavior officer response reports from 2018 through to 2024 as amended, disaggregated by ethnicity and gender or sex of subjects. I'd like to move that.
So quick question,
Yeah.
can we have age? To that, because I think that, I don't know, like, I think that if we look at 2018,
Yeah.
and that's where, like, we moved police liaison from offices, so I'm curious to see how much interaction has been with like police force and youth, youth people.
We can, but it might be easier for us to break it down by youth or adult as opposed to, like, you know.
Or you,
specific.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
referring to like
yeah.
youth or adults.
Sounds like you could do everything.
Data wizard at the table.
Yeah.
We have one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested. I don't think that the data can necessarily show us this, or maybe it can. But I'm really interested in the intersections of those things. So I would be really curious where gender and race intersect and age and race intersect. So I think that's it's not what's being necessarily requested by the Minister of Public Safety, but I think it gives us a better sense of who we're talking about when we're talking about a racial group. Are we talking about adults or youth? And that would really, I think, support, some, conversation and potential shifts if necessary. So great. Okay, so we moved and seconded that.
Sure.
Second.
Sure.
All in favor? All opposed? Carried. Okay, my on table item. I noticed on the NWPD's social media channels advertisements around a live ride along event this Friday. I'm curious if you can help me understand how we would protect people's privacy in doing something like that, because what I'm imagining is like an episode from like Cop, and so I'm just really, I just want to have a better understanding of how we're respecting people's privacy if officers are approaching people on the street, for example.
Yeah, it's definitely not an episode of Cops or to Serve and Protect. It is really more of a, and I'll let Jeff weigh in as well. It's more of a recruiting tool. So it's basically the members in there talking about what it is that they're doing throughout the shift. I think it's Instagram, and maybe you can just weigh in, but it's not like with their cameras out and they're showing up at a domestic violence, and that's not what's happening.
I mean, I figured, but I just
Yeah.
really,
We've done them before, so I don't know if they're.
Yeah, we've done it on Instagram Live, and so it'll just be off our phone in the car, and it's usually just a dialogue between the driver and the passenger to police officers. The purpose originally when we brought it in years ago was for recruitment and also transparency to kind of demystify who we are as police officers in this community, and to engage with the public. When we do go to calls, there shouldn't be radio transmissions coming over. When we do go to calls, either the officer on the phone isn't needed at the call and they can stay outside and kind of give a dialogue, or they'll turn it off and say, we'll be back in 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes or so. So there should be no personal info. If you're pulling over a car, you either put the phone down toward your feet or something like that, so you're not seeing license plates, makes, models, or who the drivers are. So,
Okay.
and we can make sure whoever it is doing it on Friday know those parameters as well.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a clever recruitment tool, and I agree the transparency is great. Also make sure it's not the driver holding that phone.
That's right.
They wouldn't want me modeling that, I know. But yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I just like, you know, in case somebody asked me, I wanted to be able to let them know. Okay, well, I think that is it. So I will call for adjournment, and we will have a 5-minute bio break and cake distribution situation. So someone move to adjourn?
very complicated.
Yes.
So moved.
Second, all in favor, all opposed, carried. Awesome, great.